Hello everyone and welcome. The final episode of Season 1 of The Rings of Power has dropped. The verdicts are in. People are either angry or happy, mostly disgruntled about the quality of the first season. But right around the time that the final episode aired, we got a tidbit of information from the showrunners about the direction of the upcoming second season of Rings of Power, which is confirmed and set to drop in 2024. They have confirmed that they see Sauron as an anti-hero and seek to take inspiration from both Walter White and Tony Soprano in developing the character of Sauron going into the season 2. Yes, it is exactly as it sounds. But let's take a look at what they said. Let's jump in. This is an article from The Hollywood Reporter. The Rings of Power showrunners. Sauron will be like a Walter White in Season 2. The Lord of the Rings series showrunners are interviewed about the finale's big Sauron reveal. Spoilers, if you haven't seen the season finale, or if you care about it. Are interviewed about Sauron's reveal and what it means for the next season. There may be viewers who, this is the story we're hoping to get in Season 1. In Season 2, we're going to give it to them. This is actually a little bit reminiscent of a video that I put out a few days ago where I said I was hoping that we would get way more information and we would get to see a lot more of Sauron's deceit and treachery leading up to the forging of the Rings of Power. So if that's what they're talking about here, then the ship's already sailed with that because he's already left. But let's get into the article a little bit further. So the Rings of Power's biggest Season 1 secret is out. Sauron has been hiding in plain sight as Halbrand, the Aragorn-like drifter who pretended, or at least allowed, Galadriel to believe that he was the long-lost king of the Southlands. Showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay gave The Hollywood Reporter some insight into the thought process of introducing the Dark Lord as a charming lawman, and also teased what comes next. What's in the Lord of the Rings books is an all-encompassing evil that everyone is afraid of, and so powerful it doesn't even have to be manifested physically. He's an image of an eye. He's an eye on the tower. We felt that Sauron should be a character in his own right. We wanted to study the currents running within him in a way that would hopefully reward audiences as they follow him moving forward as he becomes the Dark Lord. Huge problem straight away. We wanted to do an origin story for Sauron. I hate to break it to you, but his origin story takes place in the First Age in Tolkien's Legendarium, not in the Second Age. By the time he's forging the Rings of Power, Sauron is already a fully formed Dark Lord in his own right. He already has many deeds beneath his belt. That is what you would expect from a Dark Lord. The forging of the Rings of Power is not his origin story, unless I am grossly misremembering the Silmarillion, even though I'm not. He is already widely feared and is the big baddie of the story at that point. So I don't know if they're using the word origin story flippantly here, and what they mean is we want to teach you about Sauron's origin, i.e. teach us as the viewer, but if they're planning on making these events his origin story, that's just not going to make sense at all, because he is a well-formed character as a Dark Lord in Tolkien's Legendarium long before these events. But we love the idea of Sauron as a deceiver who could hopefully deceive some of the audience. There's something that Milton does in Paradise Lost that we talk a lot about, where he makes Satan a really compelling character. In some ways, he's the first anti-hero where he's compelling you and you can't take your eyes off him. Milton did that on purpose because he wants you to fall along with Adam and Eve. I do like the idea of a persuasive villain, a villain that you can really be invested in what they're saying and be invested in the messages that they're trying to give to you. I always think Andrew Ryan in BioShock was a really good example of that. You kind of, well, at least I did, you agree with the idea behind Rapture as a city and some of the things that he says, but then disagree with the conclusion, which is obviously the horror of the game that you go through. And I think Andrew Ryan is sort of like a good example. So it's not that I'm against an anti-hero trope, but some of you who are bigger Tolkien fans than me, perhaps, will have to tell me in the comment section whether or not you viewed Sauron as an anti-hero in Tolkien's work, because that is the polar opposite of what I walked away with, if I'm completely honest with you. I do not think Tolkien made any attempts to make Sauron into that kind of anti-hero figure. Pain continues. In Tolkien, Sauron is a deceiver, and we know that in the Second Age he appears in fair form. I do think that the actor who played... I don't know why he had to be called Halbrand. I don't know why they couldn't just call him Anatar, but the actor who played... Halbrand, I think, would have made a good Anatar, maybe with some costume changes. But yeah, I actually quite liked that actor's portrayal of Sauron in the last episode. As I said in a previous video, the last episode had glimpses of what could have been a good show, but it was too little, too late, and the showrunners really should have focused on Sauron's interaction and deceit of the elves. Should have been the backbone of that show. But anyway. So what if he sneaks up on you and is able to get you sympathise with him and get you and be on board with him so that you actually realise who he is, that he's already got his hooks in you? Again, if that's what you wanted to do, why wouldn't you allow that to come across when he's deceiving the elves, when he's tricking the elves into making the Rings of Power? That was the challenge. That was the chance. Again, I've already said it, but spoilers, but if he's on his way to craft the One Ring now, then that's all gone. He's back into Dark Lord mode now. The need that he had for tricking people and convincing people is done. So, anyway, it's not just as easy as that. This person is evil. I'm going to back away because you've already formed a level of attachment to him. What if we could get the audience to go through a similar journey? Many online had guessed Halbrand was Sauron along the way, which showrunners know is just fine with them. The goal wasn't to fool everybody. Why not just make him Anatar? Unless you are planning on having Sauron return as Anatar, as a separate figure, and once again influence the creation of the Rings of Power, why would you have changed the name if you were so happy with that? If you didn't care? Like, Tolkien gave him the name Anatar. Tolkien gave him the character. Why the change if everyone seems to have worked it out anyway? I will confess, I didn't know that Halbrand was going to be Sauron until about maybe like 4 episodes in, because I was watching out for Anatar. I was waiting for Anatar as a character to come along. And then the penny dropped. I was like, they're not going to do it here. He's not going to turn up. And lo and behold, he hasn't. But I don't see how that's going to work, because the 3 elven rings are already crafted. The 3 elven rings are already made. So it's like the actual forging of the Rings of Power part. The part where Anatar would have been relevant is kind of already past. Of course, completely overlooking the creation of the 7 and the 9, the other Rings of Power that are absolutely critical to the events of the Lord of the Rings, but that's by the by. Don't really know how they're going to get made. Again, unless Sauron goes back and tricks them again, If you had a sneaking suspicion over the course of the entire season, and it's ultimately confirmed, that's emotional engagement. Tragedy is one of the highest art forms, so I know I've been watching your fucking show. There's a reason people are still putting on Romeo and Juliet. Yeah, okay, fine. Yeah, Romeo and Juliet. There is a reason people still watch it, and yet you don't. That's what I was saying. You don't need the big reveal. People who knew Anatar was Sauron would have already known, but nobody else would have. You would have needed to have known about the Silmarillion. You've needed to have read it in order to know that, and that's not everyone. That's... it wasn't given in the Lord of the Rings. Fans of the movies, that would have still been a twist for. Sauron, the Anatar reveal would have worked for them still. I hope after the last episode airs, viewers watch the whole season again, which is now a different experience. I'm sure I don't need to spill more digital ink on the on the show's performance when compared to other similar shows that have been streaming at the same time. So, yep, I'm not surprised they're hoping for a second streaming out with some people. We hope that as we get into Season 2, it makes people like Season 1 even better because you're seeing it through a new prism. Time will tell. Speaking of the next season of the Prime Video series, which has begun filming, isn't expected until 2024, the producers hint Sauron will play a major role as he moves forward as an anti-hero in the model of some iconic TV characters. Here we go, this is it. Season 1 opens with, who is Galadriel? Where did she come from? What did she suffer? Why is she driven? says Payne. We're doing the same thing with Sauron in season 2. We'll fill in all the missing pieces. Well, you could have filled in your own missing pieces from season 1. Sauron can now just be Sauron, Mickey adds. Like Tony Soprano or Walter White, he's evil, but complexly evil. Like Tony Soprano or Walter White. Look, Lord of the Rings fans out there, I know we all walk away from the books with our own images in our heads. Everyone takes something different from a piece of writing, don't they? And especially one as complex as Lord of the Rings. But Sauron is like one of the most hardcore evil character. He is pure evil. His malice throughout stories in the Silmarillion and in Lord of the Rings, just his malice and his hate is its own life force almost. It is its own substance. Like he is so hateful and he does so many hateful things. I don't see any comparison, if I'm being completely honest with you, between Tony Soprano or Walter White. I don't see it. He is complexly evil, but again, happy to. I love reading comments to see whether or not people agree with my takes, because, as I say, it's a piece of literature, it's a piece of art. People do take away different things, but Sauron's complexity and his evilness for me wasn't. It wasn't like a Tony Soprano or Walter White level complexity where you could get behind their motivations and you could. With Walter White, you really were like a part of his journey and you really understood him and you saw where he got there. I thought Sauron's complexity was of the biblical kind. His evil and his desire to control absolutely everything was more about fate and determinism and this idea of accepting as a person that you're not God. You don't have ultimate control over the world. You don't have control over your own fate in lots of ways. It's only God. Tolkien, again, staunch Catholic, hugely influenced his works. That was his complexity. He was like, if you try and have too much control over your own fate and your own destiny, a godlike control, there lies ruin, and Sauron is the embodiment of that ruin. So it's just written completely different than Tony Soprano, who was a gangster, and Walter White. I just don't see it. No, I think Tolkien wrote Sauron in a way where he was just anathema. He was just completely different. And this is one of the core problems of the Rings of Power. This is one of the hurdles that it has to overcome, I believe. I don't see how it can delve into the lore behind the ringcraft and Sauron as a character without firmly explaining the relationship between Valar, Maya, Eru Ilúvatar, and the elves. I can't see how they're going to achieve that. I just don't understand. The Lord of the Rings as a so Peter Jackson made the decision that in order for people to go to the movies and enjoy Lord of the Rings, they didn't need to know that Gandalf was a Maiar and that there were Valar, and they didn't really need to know where Valinor was. They didn't need to know where the elf ships went. The story was more about the hobbits, and you could enjoy it without all of the leaves on the tree around the central story of the Lord of the Rings, basically. But the further back in time in the Legendarium we go, the more relevant it is. I mean, Sauron is the most powerful Maiar. So he is literally, as a being, one step below an actual god. Like, he's one step below godhood. He is the most powerful Maiar. And Morgoth, the original Dark Lord, was the most powerful Valar. So just the way Tolkien had him be this immortal figure, he doesn't have to fear death. Really, his spirit is immortal. So I just don't understand the motivations of Walter White with his cancer diagnosis. Sauron's immortal. Anyway, let's wrap it up. Felt like if we did that in season 1, he'd overshadow everything else. Well, to be honest with you, everything else needed a little bit of overshadowing, because if I have to watch one more fucking story of the Half-Foot, I'm going to lose it, honestly. So the first season is like Batman Begins, and The Dark Knight is the next movie with Sauron manoeuvring out in the open. We're really excited. Season 2 has a canonical story. There may well be viewers who are like, the story we were hoping to get in season 1, in season 2, we're going to give it to them. Let me know in the comments below, guys, what you think. if you can see... let me know if you can see Sauron Breaking Bad.